Hi everyone, welcome to webinar number 2 for improving the fitness of your finances, specifically designed for athletes. Today we've got the second topic being setting your foundation for financial freedom. So we're going to be tapping into some cash flow issues, some financial advisory type work, a bit sexier, I suppose, than the tax planning stuff from last week, last month. Yeah, we'll see. But so I've got obviously Morgan here with me again, and I think we might just get straight into it. I think we can get
going. Yeah, just quickly, disclaimer: this is not personal advice. All right. So starting today, knowledge is power. The reason why we say that, there's a few elements to it, but the financial plan isn't around the best investment option or setting a budget. It's around working out what your goals are, what you want to achieve in life, achieving them in the best way possible whilst enjoying as much life along the way. That's really what setting a financial plan is all about. But to be able to do that, you need to understand about your situation, and that means know your position. That comes down to the core components of any good financial plan are going to be your assets, and then we're talking about your lifestyle assets like the family home, home contents, cars, financial assets, things that can be invested to achieve an income to help you live your life and grow in time. Liabilities, looking at your mortgages, credit cards, income. Now, income is going to be the biggest driver of your wealth creation, and it's a core component of your financial plan. Expenses, obviously reduced expenses, that improves the amount of money you have to do other things with. Now, the big one for athletes is your time frame. Traditionally, time frame means how long do you work for? When do you retire? Have you got enough, or do you need to keep going? For athletes, you start your career and your earning potential at your end is your beginning is other people's ends. So you've got this incredible earning potential right at the start of your working life, and really you've got one shot to change your life with that. You don't want to stuff it up because it's over very quickly, and things could change, or your income is likely to change drastically in your post-playing career. And then finally, needs and objectives. And this can't be, or it's difficult to quantify this. This is really around what it is that you want to achieve in life. Now, all these elements, once you take account of all these, you can create any financial plan you want, but each one of these elements needs to be accounted for.
I think the important thing there is, I suppose, it's important, yes, that you as the advisor knows this, but also that the athlete has an understanding of this as well. I imagine. I feel like a lot of the time when it comes to financial advice or what to invest in, it's a bit can get into the too hard baskets. That's like you just take care of it. But this shows why it's important for it to be a mutual thing to work towards together, rather than you're the advisor who deal with it for us.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. You could have the world's best financial plan, but if you don't get it and your advisor hasn't explained it to you, then it's not going to work. So you need to understand these things, and they need to be able to take you on that journey.
So when we're talking about knowing your position, it's not only the advisor, but it's yourself as well, and understanding that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, a good plan, more important than ever before. Once upon a time, and our parents did this, you'd buy a house, take out a mortgage, and just knock that mortgage down over time. And that made sense because interest rates were so much more expensive. Things are a lot different today. We're at the lowest rates we've ever seen, and we really, it's asset prices are the highest they've ever been. Trying to buy a house is harder than it's ever been before. So you have to get smarter with your money, and a good financial plan will allow you to do that. And it could take time to achieve your goals, and that's fine. Life doesn't come, not everything comes to us quickly, but having that plan in place provides a lot of security and peace of mind.
Yeah, we've got a bit more flexibility, certainly a lot of our parents probably don't have super because it wasn't around when they first started as well. So there are some good things, just that house isn't a year's salary anymore. It's a few more years than that. So yeah, it has changed, but in bang on, it's really important to. That's why the advice is important, because we have to be smarter around it. Our decision making.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you think today, you park your money in the bank, and I've said it here. When you account for the small level of interest you earn, and then the tax you have to pay on that interest earned, and then the rising cost of living, money in the bank actually loses its purchasing power whilst it's parked there. So you can't be doing that. You do have to be smarter with your money. And these are some of the benefits of having a good plan. Specifically for athletes, you don't want to be worrying about your finances. You want to focus on what matters is maintaining that peak athletic performance. Because, as I said before, your income and your ability to earn that income that's your greatest asset, and that's the greatest driver of your wealth creation. And if you've got all these other issues going on in your life behind the scenes, and you can't focus on maintaining that peak performance, then you're not going to play as well. You're not going to get the contracts you need. It all flows through.
Yeah, mentally, it can't be a good thing if you're cricketer going out to bat and you're like, well, if I don't score runs here, financially I'm going to struggle. Whereas if you know that's going well in the background, you're going out there and you're enjoying it, I suppose. So yeah, we speak to a lot of people in that situation. And I think even personally, even outside of sport, if you've got your finances in order and everything's flowing, I think we talked about the other day, most arguments between you and your wife, they tend to be financial all the time, but if you have that sorted, it just makes life so much better.
Yeah, completely. And the other key thing is start early. The power of compounding returns is incredible. But if you get a good plan in place from day one, like I was saying, you set yourself up for the rest of your life if you start early. But if you leave until the end of the career to start thinking about it, you might still be okay depending on how you went, but the opportunity cost will be huge.
And I'm sure we'll go into it in detail and showing the difference in there, but I think that's something that we're really trying to emphasise as part of this education program. And it's not something you start a couple of years before retirement, it's something you think about as soon as you pretty much sign that first contract.
Now, this is a great quote by Benjamin Franklin, and it just illustrates, and we'll show it, the power of compounding returns and what that means. But money makes money, and the money that money makes money. Perfect example of what happens in real life with compounding returns. And to illustrate that, what's the better offer? 25 million bucks up front, or an amount starting at 10 cents, but doubling every day for 30 days? What do you reckon, mate?
Doesn't it? I mean, you'd be pretty happy with the first one, but knowing you, I'm going to assume the second one is better.
Well, yeah, you know it's going to be the second one. What you might not realise is
how much.
So 10 cents, starting at 10 cents, doubling daily, that will hit $107 million after 30 days. That's huge. Then that is compounding in a nutshell.
Yeah, crazy. I think another example I think you've given before is if you fold a piece of paper 42 times or something, it ends up it double it every time. It ends up being like here to the start of something.
It's the moon.
It's silly. So as you said, that just really emphasises the power of compounding.
And bring this back to you, as you were saying, you start early, you get good advice from the beginning, and you can set your career up and set your life up for the rest of your life. Well, that's the example.
That's it. There you go.
Yeah, 42 times to the moon. Incredible stuff.
Yeah.
It's just our minds, we think in a linear way, but this is exponential, and it's incredible to get your head around. So I mean, it's all well and good seeing numbers on the screen. This is how it looks like in real life. So just using basic example, 3 people. So you've got Susan, she invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 25 and 35, so 10 years starting early. You've got Bill, he invests $5,000, but 10 years later than Susan, and he does it for much longer. So he invests 3 times as much starting 10 years later. And then you've got Chris starting the same time as Susan, but just maintaining that throughout his life. So ultimately, Chris invests 4 times as much. But because Susan started earlier, 10 years earlier, even though she only invested 1/3 of what Bill invests, she actually ends up with more money. Meanwhile, Chris, where he just stuck to the process, started at the same time as Susan, but keeps going. You can see when the power of those compounding exponential returns really start to kick in, and it just keeps going up from there.
Yeah, it does emphasise that early career. And I think the biggest thing with that is how much that can help you on when you are doing that transition into life after sport. If you've got some passive income sort of earning, which I'm sure you'll go into detail later as well, it just gives you that comfort after you finish your career that you can, you've got a bit of time to work out what you want to do. Obviously you'd be thinking about that during your career as well, but it definitely gives you that comfort that you can transition with knowing that there's some income coming in the door on the side.
Yeah. So I mean that's all well and good and it sounds great, but where do you start? So the decision, the strategy to meet your goals, it's going to depend on what your goals are. Everyone's different. That's the main thing. You'll have mates who are all doing different things, want to achieve different things. What they're doing could work for you, or it could be completely inappropriate. So the key thing to be aware of: everyone's different. Everyone's goals are different. The first step is to know what it is you want to achieve, not what your mates want to achieve. And then the strategy to meet that goal, again, a strategy is not about just investing money, right? That can be used to help achieve a goal, but strategy at high level, it's do you repay debt? Tax effectively restructure your loans. Should you actually be parking money in the bank? Because in some circumstances that makes sense. If you want to buy a house in a year's time, you can't go investing that money, because if the market moves against you like it did last year, you could have 1/3 or 2/3 of what you started with 1 year earlier. So parking money in the bank isn't always a bad decision if it meets your strategy. One thing all athletes need to be doing though, 2 years of living needs in cash. And that, your general rule of thumb is 1 year, but given the nature of your jobs and how things can go pear-shaped really quickly, that's a really important thing to be doing. But there's any number of other strategies available, and again, it's not necessarily about investing money. Invariably, that's going to come into play at some stage, and then the way you invest your money is going to matter, and what tax structure you use to do it through, whether it's super or a company or a trust or whatever it is. But just get your needs and objectives right, work out the right strategy, and go from there.
And blur out that white noise around you. Everyone's got their personal, goals. Everyone has a different family. Everyone has different complexities that come with a family, and they're all going to contribute to your goals and potential. So, yeah, it's a really good point that we need to, don't compare yourself to everyone else. Think, what do you want out of this?
Yeah. Because it's easy to compare yourself to others, and especially with some of your mates, they could be leaders in sport. The money they're earning could be very different to what you're earning, and that changes things.
Yeah.
So we touched on this before, but one thing that's going to be really important is just mitigating risks where you can. Now, you can never fully mitigate risks, but at least you can protect yourself and put yourself into a better position for when things go wrong. And really the key thing is our bodies are not built to last at the best of times. But some of you guys out there, you're out there belting each other every day. So you've got to just be cognizant of the risks and be ready for when things don't go to plan.
Yeah, there's a lot of sports out there, your body shouldn't be doing stuff like that. I was watching a documentary on gymnasts the other day, and the girls, like, some of the, it's just
through. So
yeah, I know. So yeah, your body isn't built to last. That's for sure. Especially what we're putting in through.
So these are some of the things to think about. Like we were saying, 2 years of living needs in cash. That's really, really important. But have a backup plan as well. Don't just wait till the end of your career and think, geez, I've now got to find a job. Start early. Start developing those transferable skills. Study and get those qualifications. Make yourself as employable as possible for when you do finally retire from sport.
It doesn't have to be study. I think we've spoken about this before. It could be just getting yourself developed, like getting business, personal development skills within a business. If you've got a family business that you can tap into and do some training within there, won't follow the CEO or whatever it is. You don't necessarily have to have a degree at the end of it. And again, it's back to what we talked about before. It totally depends on your personal situation and what you want to get out of it. If you don't need a business degree, there's no point just doing it for the sake of doing it. It sits on your resume. Yeah, you might get better outcomes from just having a mentor in the business world and learning from them. So I think that's a really good point around that.
Yeah, and just get exposure. Athletes have incredible networks. Talk to people. See who you can get introductions to. Get exposure to different people in different industries because the opportunities are there if you look for them. Surplus cash flow. I mean, this is a no-brainer. You can always live a good life as an athlete and you'll have a great income, but put it to work too. Buy financial assets that are going to appreciate in value and provide a growing income stream. Debt. That's a very big one. Debt's been a great, borrowing to invest has been a great way for Australians to build wealth. You guys need to be careful because the last thing you want to do is take out a whole lot of debt to buy financial assets, which makes sense for some people, but then you do it based on your income today, all of a sudden the career's over and you're just drowning in debt that you can't afford to service because you're not earning the dollars you used to. That is something you really need to be careful of as an athlete, which some other people in other industries perhaps don't as much.
Yeah, I think we've spoken before, maybe it's something that mentally athletes potentially need to go, right, I can get a 30-year mortgage, but maybe I should be looking at it as a 10-year mortgage. So maybe I should be looking at, the lifetime of that loan. I should only be looking at it as a 10-year loan rather than a 30-year loan, because that gives you a bit more comfort, but it makes it more realistic, pending something going wrong, what I can repay in the short term.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb, I reckon, for athletes. Take out a loan that you can pay off in 5 to 10 years.
Or future sporting earnings rather than the long term.
So investing, you've got great cash flow coming in. You need to put it to work. Should you be investing, and how should you do it? It's an important thing to be thinking about. The one classic rule of investing is the higher the expected return, the higher the risk you take on to achieve that return. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Investing's not exciting either, or shouldn't be exciting. It's a slow burn, and with a good strategy over time, you'll achieve your goals. But there's a difference between investing and gambling, just throwing your money into something that you think is going to get you rich quick. They're the kinds of things that you only ever put in as much as you think you're prepared to lose. So that's a big one. The other considerations, the time frame, that's essential. You can't go putting your money into the share market, as I was saying, if your time frame's 2 years. The market can move against you. We did see it drop 35% last year. And if you just put money in because you're trying to get a good return to then do something else with it later, potentially you stuffed yourself. So it's about getting that strategy, what's the goal, what's the right strategy to meet that goal. And if it does require you to invest money, you need to have a strategy that's going to protect you and have defensive investments in there so that if things do go wrong, you don't have to sell it at a low point and permanently capitalize that loss. So really just get good advice.
And I imagine there's a bit of a balancing thing there as well, right? Like, you know, you've got you want a long-term horizon. If there's, you know, if they're looking at, if a client came to you, for example, and said, oh, there's this 10% of the money I want to use that I've got a bit of an interest in, I feel like it could be an area that'll, you know, surge. You guys are obviously happy to incorporate that as part of the strategy if that's what the athletes do, but it's more, yes, we can do that, but that shows the long-term effects of that. If it, you know, if it went kaput, you know, are you happy to lose that money almost if someone wants to go really aggressive on something?
Well, that's right. And really a good strategy that's appropriate to you, it won't actually matter what happens in the short term. If you've got that long-term strategy right, and the right mix of investments, and then you invest and the market falls, that doesn't matter because that's short term, and as long as the strategy is right, you'll recover and you'll be okay. But when the strategy is wrong and you're making uninformed decisions, that's where it can be dangerous. So here's just a classic example, and it's looking at the end of 2018 to just after COVID. Someone investing $10,000, depending on the strategy, you can see that the market moves and it can move against you very, very quickly. And so this is why two-year time horizons just aren't going to cut it if you're going into the market. And that's the same with property, it could be shares, it doesn't really matter. You need at least 5 years, preferably 7 or more though. So as an athlete, what should the plan be? Part of that's going to revolve around the family home, and that's the family home has a hell of a lot of benefits outside of just putting a roof over your head. In our mind, and this is more for professional athletes, it provides a financial foundation. Now, the way it does that, I mean, obviously there's the lifestyle benefit. You do have a roof over your head and you can enjoy a home today and into the future. There's the tax benefits. You can sell a home with no CGT or capital gains tax. That's the only true tax-free store of wealth is the family home. Doesn't mean you put every last cent you have in the world into it, but it's an important consideration. But it provides other things like with the mortgage, repaying a mortgage. Some people don't have the financial discipline to sit on cash and invest in the market. They do have the discipline to pay down a debt, and that is really important with the benefit that a family home provides. It provides you a discipline to repay that mortgage, and then when it's over, you've already got the discipline in place to start exploring other strategies. So even though with interest rates so low, you might be able to get a better return from investing money. If you don't have the discipline for it, you're not going to go wrong just paying down your mortgage. Other things, with invariably as an athlete, you're going to move. You're going either interstate, you'll go overseas. It can be transitioned into a financial asset that provides you with a rental income or an investment income. It gives you a home to come home to. But another big one's the 6-year rule. Potentially, even if it is a financial asset, normally subject to capital gains tax, you can transition the home into a financial asset with certain rules and pay no tax when you sell it, provided that you move back in there within 6 years, that you haven't called somewhere else at home. You need to get tax advice, but it provides a lot of flexibility and a financial foundation. And importantly, the equity that builds in the home over time, you can then leverage off that to either buy more property, expand your wealth, buy shares, do other things. It provides a springboard to greater wealth creation.
I'm listening to me with the CET. That is a really important one for athletes, especially those that do end up overseas. And please feel free to reach out around the primary residence, but it is a really helpful tool to make your home a financial asset and then bring income into the whole portfolio. And I think it really important to that is the structure and the way that we set up a loan as well. One of the things that I find that we see a lot of is an athlete who goes overseas pays the mortgage directly into the actual mortgage account, hasn't got an offset account there. And then when they come home and they need cash, even though they might be still using that property as an investment property, they can't claim the interest. So there's definitely some really structural things that come with that as well that are really important. That's why it's important to come to get a good advice around it for sure.
Yeah, you want a good broker to really help you in that space. Yeah. And you don't want to have all your money tied up in the home with no cash on hand, and then your career's over and you don't have any more money coming in. You want to still be able to access cash, but you can't just sell your garage to fund your lifestyle. So having financial flexibility through appropriate debt structuring goes a long way.
Yeah.
And then this comes down to, again, for athletes, a proven strategy. It's certainly low risk, but it's a good approach, being debt-free at retirement. And when we say retirement, we mean the end of your sporting career. If you can knock out that home loan, it doesn't matter. Well, it will matter a hell of a lot less if you struggle to find work or you get a low-paying job post-career. If you've got a home that's almost paid off or completely debt-free, you're a hell of a way along on your journey already, and you're ahead of a lot of other people your age. It provides you flexibility. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I think there we touched on it, like looking at that, buying a house that you're not going to have to service over 30 years, 5 to 10 years. Like maybe we're better off buying some smaller houses or something that kids are going to build. That you don't need a family home when you're 20 years old. You don't need a massive Queensland or in an amazing area. You want the investment to still be a good investment, but it's got to be something that's within what your needs as well, because otherwise you're going to have this, as you said, you're going to potentially have to sell your home when there's no need to. You can't service the debt anymore, and then that's pointless. So it needs to fit your circumstances, and I think that's why having potentially that look at a loan as a 5 to 10 year thing rather than a 30 thing is a good guide or rule.
Yeah. So the main drivers of wealth creation, there's lots of different ones. The biggest one, as we were saying, your income. It's not the best investment in the world that's going to get you a return, that's going to drive your wealth. It's your ability to contribute capital into that investment and then compound that growth over time. That is what's going to be the biggest driver of your income. Your ability to work, to play sport and generate that income, that is the greatest driver of your wealth, and that is your greatest asset. You are your greatest asset. So it's not your home, it's not some crypto thing, it's not anything else, it's you being able to work and run. And so that's a really important consideration. And it's not just about either just playing, but post-career, even then, you might find a job as an employee, you might do some sponsorship deals, but if you're continually investing in yourself, whether it's through the study, through the exposure we were talking about before, meeting the right people, that's still an investment in yourself, building your network, building the options available to you. So income, big driver of wealth creation. Investing still, obviously, you put your money into investment, it grows over time. It's a driver of wealth creation. But what is a good investment? What's a good investment to me might not be a good investment to Will or to you, and vice versa. It comes down to you and your preferences. But fundamentally, if you put your money, your surplus cash flow, into a financial asset that's going to continue to grow in time ahead of inflation and provides a consistent and growing income through the production of goods and services, or both, that is a good option for you. That's just the crux of it. But some of the other things, understand your investment journey. An investment that sounds great, but you've got no idea what's going on, that's not a good investment, because you just don't know what you don't know. Things can blow up in your face. And the other thing is liquidity. Being able to access money when you need it is important. So property is great, and property should form part of a diversified portfolio. But if you've got all your money in property, like I was saying, you can't eat your house. You can't just sell a garage. Thanks, Paul Peter. You can't just sell a garage to fund your needs. So liquidity is important, especially for an athlete when things can change so quickly. And it's just got to align to your needs and objectives.
And your family's objectives as well. I imagine like your husbands, your wives, it's got to be a group decision as well. I think you got to sleep at night as well. So I imagine that forms part of what your objectives are between a couple or family as well, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. One of the key rules around investing though is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And think of it objectively in your situation. If you have bought a whole lot of different properties, then maybe you need to be paying down debt. Or if you've got great cash flow, diversify, look to other asset classes. You could invest in shares, private equity, but just get good advice around it. But the important thing is no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow, next year. We've got less insight than ever before, given the nature of the world we're in. Diversify your wealth, diversify the risk. Even Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor that's ever lived, of our time at least, his fortune he attributes just to compounding returns, smart financial decisions, not these short-term successes from buying the next big thing.
I think you said a lot of his wealth has come later in life. It wasn't something that started early on. It is built up.
He wasn't. I mean, he's always done quite well for himself, but it wasn't until his 50s and 60s that he became a billionaire and multi-billionaire. It all came later in life from compounding returns. So investing, it's a slow burn. But the chart here basically shows different types of investments: Australian shares, international shares, and lists the best and worst performing one from 1991 to 2020. You can see the red, the best performers. It can be any asset class can be the best performer or worst performer in any given year. So having the right strategy and the long-term outlook, not the short-term outlook, is what's going to achieve financial success. And these are just some of the options you have available. Shares, high risk, high reward. Property is not as risky, traditionally hasn't returned as well as shares, and then going fixed interest cash. Now, we've been through income, we've been through investing. Another key driver of wealth creation for 30 years, at least for Australians and Australian residential property investors, is leverage, or essentially borrowing to invest. Now, the really key concept behind this is that $1 today is not the same as $1 tomorrow. So $1 million of debt today, $1 million, the purchasing power of that equivalent amount in 30 years' time is very different. $1 million in 30 years' time won't buy you anywhere near as much. So the reason why leverage has been such a big wealth creator is that people have borrowed to buy financial assets and mainly property. The property has continued to grow ahead of inflation over time. Meanwhile, that debt, even if paid interest only, it's lost its purchasing power over time with inflation. So essentially inflation and the general cost of living increasing each year has deflated the purchasing power of that debt. And even if they had the same level of debt in 30 years, that asset that debt's attached to has just grown incredibly over that time. And then the equity between the debt and the asset value, that then allows people to strip it out and build more wealth. So it's been a huge driver of wealth creation. And it's really largely been driven as well by interest rates falling. Now we're at the bottom. It's hard to know if that's going to continue to be a driver of wealth creation, but the cost of living will continue to go up. Making smart debt decisions is very important there.
Yeah. Just to probably to simplify that as an example, are you sort of saying that, right, if you bought $1 million house today, in 30 years' time, that house is worth $2 million, and $1 million is actually probably only worth $500,000 equivalent, and so that's where that gap, that bridge gap? Is that the basic understanding of what it's trying to?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you're borrowing to invest, and you'll pay down the debt over time. The asset will go up, and then the difference between, I mean, that's the equity. But also, yeah, $1 million today could only be worth the equivalent of $500,000 today in 30 years. So
yeah, the profit might be double.
Yeah. So it's been a big driver. But importantly, debt can go wrong. Not all debts are created equal. Good debts are borrowing to buy financial assets. They're tax deductible to you, but not just tax deductible debts. I mean, things like study debt, things that are going to help you improve your income, the biggest driver of wealth creation. I mean, study debt, it's a pain to incur, but if that's going to help you achieve greater job opportunities and earning potential, then it's worth the cost. And then the mortgage, I mean, this is a bit debatable, but the lifestyle benefits a mortgage on the family home can provide, and then the financial foundation, as we discussed, it's not a terrible debt to have. It's a necessary debt, if anything. But I mean, just to avoid, obviously, borrowing to buy an appreciating asset like a car, that's a no-brainer. Avoid that. Don't rack up credit card debt. Buy now, pay later. That's just trouble waiting to happen. And negative gearing's always been attractive to investors, and to some it makes a lot of sense, but for athletes, I think not. I actually think negative gearing is extremely dangerous when you're an athlete, and I just want to touch on that. Firstly, what is it? And understanding negative gearing is important. But essentially, if you've got an investment like a rental property, for instance, there's a cost to holding that property. And part of the cost is the mortgage and the interest repayments. There's rates, things like that. There's agent fees. There's costs to holding a property, but over time, you'd hope the growth of the property and the rental income it achieves justifies the costs. When you negatively gear, basically the ongoing holding costs of the property aren't being covered by the income the property is achieving. So you can actually then claim a tax deduction between that shortfall for other areas of income you're earning, say from your employment. That's negative gearing in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that people hate paying tax. We all, unfortunately, live in Australia. The tax rates are high on a lot of jurisdictions, and so this negative gearing is sort of like, oh, I happen to have negative gearing, saving a heap of tax. But from a cash flow perspective, it's you're out of pocket, whether you like it or not. And what that also doesn't include in there is the fact that the payment that you're making to the bank to pay for your mortgage, you're only claiming the interest part of that. You're not claiming the actual physical cash payment. So not only in a negative gearing from it's a negative result, you've got to add the payments that you're making to the actual mortgage as well, and the principal repayments. So from a cash flow perspective, it's not necessarily a good thing. As you said, it can be a good thing within a portfolio around the way we structure it. We can structure in a way that the negative gearing part is a good thing for the overall family structure, I suppose. But it's not something that you're like, I just want to go and buy property because I want to negative gear. That's a silly reason to get involved in it. I think what you said, given that there's a short-term investment opportunity for an athlete, or that there's a short-term cash flow opportunity for an athlete in that early part of their career, I think that's what you're trying to get at, is that having a negative gearing thing can potentially be dangerous.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right, because I mean, negative gearing might be great when you're at the peak of your earning potential. You've got this great cash flow coming in, and you can service the expenses of an investment that's actually going backwards through the holding costs. But if your career, again, it suddenly ends, and we just can't stress the risk of this enough, but if it suddenly ends and you're negatively geared, you're not going to be able to afford that property. It's going to have to be sold. And that, just buying and selling property is expensive, just the transactional costs.
Indirect taxes, duty, all that sort of stuff that comes with it.
Might not be the right time as well. There could be rules around lending requirements. The banks might be getting stricter in that space, and they're talking about it now. We've seen property actually go backwards in the past on the back of these rule changes, And if this happens and then you're forced to sell because everything's gone pear-shaped in your career, that can have, you could have less than you started. It could be really detrimental to your finances. So really, negative gearing means that that asset is losing you money until it's either positively geared or you sell it at a profit. And this really just covers what we've just said. But I think a big thing for me is people don't like paying tax. You're right, like no one wants to pay tax. Everyone wants to get the best return with no risk and no tax from their investments, right? But if you're paying tax, you're actually making money.
We all own a buckload of cars and we want to refund it. It doesn't work like that. Paying tax is probably a good thing in a weird sort of way, because it means you're in front, like you're earning money. That's a good thing. Paying tax is a good thing.
Yeah, but if you're saving on tax from your investment's actually going backwards. So, and that's what negative gearing is. It's hoping the asset value goes up enough to cover all the costs you've incurred along the way. Not good for an athlete. It does suit some people who have really strong cash flows and can afford to pay all the holding costs and that shortfall. Definitely not appropriate for everyone, and definitely athletes need to be very, very careful with this strategy. So what are some other things to think about? I mean, another lever of wealth creation, obviously expenses. You've got fixed costs, which you just need to pay just living life is expensive just to be here and breathing. That's your fixed costs. Discretional you can play around with, and if you're spending too much, you can always reel that in. The fixed cost, not so much. But being cognizant of tax deductible and non-deductible costs, buying financial assets, costs involved with that, and costs involved with holding financial assets, they're not the end of the world because they're tax deductible and they're ultimately helping you achieve greater wealth. Non-deductible costs are the opposite. The big one though for athletes is the lifestyle creep, and that basically means you might be earning a decent salary playing whatever sport you're doing initially, then you're making big time, salary goes up a huge amount, you keep spending accordingly, you actually might end up going nowhere because you're spending and eating into all your new income. So that lifestyle creep is actually really important to be aware of, and just as simple as not changing your lifestyle when your income goes up, that mitigates that.
And I think that's something that we've spoken a lot about, and particularly within athletes within a team sport. It's really hard to stop yourself from doing that, but it's really important. So I think we always talk about if you're on an early contract, you know, in a team, and then you're doing exactly the same job as someone who's been in that team for 10 years, but their salary might be, you know, I'm sure there's situations where there's guys on 10 times the amount that you know, the young early person's on, but they still want to live the same lifestyle, and it doesn't work like that. You can't afford to think like that, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with lifestyle creep, is that you need to think, right, this is what I want, this is how I want to live, and I need to maintain that no matter where, and whether my salary goes up or not, I want to keep maintaining those lower costs, or the necessary costs rather than the fancy stuff.
Yeah, it's not about keeping up with the Joneses, that's for sure, because that will financially kill you.
Yeah, and that is just where we see a lot of decisions going wrong. And, you know, buying fancy cars is a good example. Whether you're buying a car like we're accountants, so I'm always going to hate a depreciating asset. But there's just, you know, is there any need to buy a really awesome car? Like, you know, some people might like cars, and that's fine, but you've got to understand within it how it works in that financial position, and it's an asset that, you know, cars never really go up; they always come down. So it's not, you know, is it worth it? No.
And the other thing is that you say you buy a car, you take out a loan. That loan for your car might actually stop you getting a loan on your house because you no longer have the serviceability to buy the house because you're servicing other debt. So before you borrow money for anything, speak to your broker, talk to them about what your goals are, speak to your accountant or financial advisor, and just make sure you're making better informed decisions around what you're doing. Now, this helps you on your journey. It's not the biggest driver of wealth creation, but it certainly helps you along the way, is structuring. and ownership of assets. There's different, anyone can buy an investment. I can go on the stock market today, buy something in 2 seconds. Anyone can do that. But the ownership structure is just so important, because that can be the difference between paying a hell of a lot of tax every year or potentially paying no tax, depending on which structure you buy that investment through. And that can be, you just buy it in your own name, but a family trust, a company, looking at superannuation. There are also other structures out there, but each have different tax implications and different investment strategies are suited to different structures and how they work. So buying it right the first time will save you a hell of a lot of heartache and cost when you have to unwind that bad decision.
Yeah, that's really important, because we see clients who bought stuff in the wrong structure before, and then trying to move it to a different structure with a tax benefit can be really costly. There's lots of dollars that you can save by setting it up in the correct structure to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I've met a number of athletes, and they own all their investments themselves in their own name, and they're just paying so much tax, and they just don't need to.
Yeah,
so
frustrating.
And we'll just get through this, but this gives you just a few pros and cons of the different structures available. Again, $10,000 invested through different ways, and you use it for different reasons, has different benefits. Now, this is a really big point for me, but price is what you pay, value is what you get, and there can be a disconnect. So it's really important to think about that when you're at the barbecue having a chat with your mates, because one thing you're going to get so often is someone's going to come to you with some great investment opportunity, and it costs X amount of dollars, but the potential rewards are going to be infinite. It'll be awesome until you put your money in there and you pay the price, but it all blows up and it's a big Ponzi scheme or whatever. Price is what you pay, value is what you get, and don't just trust what your mates are doing. Speak to your accountant, speak to an advisor, because you just don't know what you don't know. You need to know what the risks are. Does it suit your strategy? Is it going to help you meet your objectives in the short and long term? So that's a big one for me. But also some of the other points here. I mean, people only tell you about. It's like when gambling, you only hear about the wins, not the losses. And there's a hell of a lot of losses out there. But everyone's different too. You never know who's some big trust fund beneficiary, but as well just the disparity between incomes in your industries. Then some people can be earning a fortune, like I said, 10 times as much. And that means what they can do with their money is completely different to what you can do with your money.
Yeah, they can afford those short-term losses, whereas someone on a lot less money has to look long-term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if someone comes to you with an opportunity, the best way to talk, and they know what they're talking about, the best thing to ask them is what percentage of your wealth have you put into it? And if they're smart, then they know to diversify the risk, and they've put a small percentage in. But because they put 100 grand in, doesn't mean you put 100 grand in. 100 grand might be nothing to them. So it's not about the dollar amount, it's about the percentage amount. But yeah, other things, just trust your gut. And like I said before, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But yeah, invest with friends and family with caution, because issues arise, but get a second opinion. And do research on your advisor as well. If you're not happy with them or you get a bad vibe, the same rules apply. Reputation is everything in our industry, so feel free to do your research. All right.
So yeah, we got. Thanks, Well, that was really helpful. I think it gives a lot of clarity about where to make a start, what to think, and I think owning your investment decisions. I think that's a really big key message from my perspective. Is that you've got to be part of it. It's all well and good to say, no, just don't have to deal with it. I want to let them deal with it, but they're not going to make, and your advisor's not going to make a good investment decision for you if they don't know what your goals and objectives are. So it's really important to take hold of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, the investment product you ultimately buy, whether that's a property or shares or whatever it is, that is the last step in the process. Not the first.
Michael, see if we've got any questions. Right, really easy one here. Crypto, yes or no? I'm sure it's going to be your most hated question.
That's a pretty common one. I mean, the one thing I will say about crypto is if anyone says they're an expert in crypto, they're not. No one knows. No one knows what's going to go on. No one knows how that's going to play out. There's undoubtedly a future in blockchain and the applications of them. But like think about the banks last year and the property market, and all the banks, and they hire the smartest minds in the world to tell them what's going to happen in the economy. And they all said property was going to fall 20%. They all got it wrong. And we've seen property go gangbusters. So, and that's with a really well-known defined asset class being property. And then you've got all these crypto people saying, oh, this is going to change the world. And maybe it is, but for anyone to say they know, they don't.
And I suppose that, imagine that comes back to your long-term investment strategy. Like crypto potentially could be part of that if that's your goals and objectives, to use a small percentage of you, and you might feel passionate about it or something. That's fine. If that fits into your goals and objectives, you're not saying absolutely not. You're just saying we don't necessarily have the long-term knowledge of it yet to know where it's going to put you in 20 years time.
But yeah, like have a crack, but just be prepared to lose that money too. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is the central banks and the major economies of the world, they don't want to lose control from a decentralized currency. So if anything, we're likely to see all the central banks issuing their new coins and regulating away all these other random coins. You've got the Doge coin, which is bigger than Morgan Stanley now and other investment banks. It's just it's a wild world out there.
Yeah.
But just if you're going to have a crack, do it. Just be prepared to lose the money. Don't put in anything more than you're prepared to lose.
Yeah, that's really good. Another question here: insurance. How should an athlete go about looking at their insurance?
Yeah, insurance is really tough in your space. It does depend on what sport you play. Rugby players, because they're all league players or any of those contact sports, really hard to insure because you literally are just belting each other all day, and that means that your risk of having an injury is really high, which means your risk of claiming to the insurer is really high. So they don't want to touch you. Doesn't mean that you can't get insurance, and you should definitely speak to a professional advisor about this, because you might have a young family, you might be earning really good money, have a whole lot of debt on the house you bought, you're the breadwinner, something happens, you become disabled or you pass away, you want to make sure that your family's financially secure, and there are solutions out there. So just speak to an advisor and they'll be able to help you.
Awesome. Right, well, Morgan, thanks again as always. Thanks everyone who's been listening live. Anyone who's going to be watching the recording, remember, please feel free to send through your questions once you've watched it. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing you in a couple of months. Awesome.
Thank you.